Tim's News Explosion. 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 Tim's News Explosion.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday special of Tim's News Explosion on the 29th of May, 2022. We are live on the Wilms Front, YouTube, DLive, and Odyssey channels, as well as the interactive entropy software, where you can ask myself or my guest tonight questions, or even better yet, you can send through a super chat to support the shows. It is just after 9:45 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. Happy lockdown number 4 anniversary to all of my fellow Victorians. Now, the reason I am airing Tim's News Explosion first on a Sunday is because I'm leaving for Sydney and New South Wales tomorrow, and we'll be away for a week, so there'll be no Tim's News Explosion, Wilms Front, or Trad Tasman talk for the next 7 days, but I will be returning next for a show Monday the 6th of June, and the reason why it is at this later time, thanks everyone for tuning in so late. I know a lot of you like to hit the hay early on. This is because I'm chatting with the senior editor of the Unshackled and United Australia Party election volunteer, Damien Ferri. He's a family guy, so he's been putting his children to sleep, but he's joining us now. Damien, it's great to have you on. I think this is the first time I've had you on one of my programs post the Unshackled Waves.
Yeah, no, thanks heaps, Tim. I mean, I really appreciate it, and there's definitely a lot to talk about tonight.
Yes, it's 1 week since Anil, the new nickname for Anthony Albanese. Well, that's what we call him here. Since it'll be 1 week tomorrow since you were sworn in as Prime Minister, and so far it hasn't been too bad. But he's just had that interim ministry with, and it's mainly been an international focus with him going to the Quad meeting and Penny Wong going to the Pacific to try and compete with China for various agreements with Pacific nations.
Yeah, I can't see them achieving much there, to be honest. I mean, when it comes to focus on China, they're really, they would look at the Labor Party here and basically laugh and just say, I mean, these people are just so weak, and they wouldn't really be serious about defending our national interests. So I think when it comes to those kind of issues, they're very delighted in the Liberals having a loss over the last weekend on the election, and I think they'll be looking for good times with the Labor government in charge here.
It seems that because the Pacific nations have been talking for a while about we'll be impacted by climate change, rising sea levels, our islands will disappear, but it seems to be that it's a way of getting shakedown money. And because we are in this new Cold War with the People's Republic of China, the Chinese Communist Party, who engage in checkbook diplomacy, there seems to be, even amongst those on the right, this view that, okay, we'll just write the check for to fight climate change and, yeah, be on our side, not Communist China's.
That's totally right there. And I think, I mean, you really have to balance the approach out, but at the same time, you don't want to sell out your national interests just in the sake of not having China on the doorstep. I mean, I really do understand that there's a lot of people thinking, well, if we do end up giving them the money, then maybe it would keep the Chinese not so close to us, a little bit away, and it'll save us in future. But I mean, at the same time, we can't just be throwing money around when it could be really spent here on a lot of the services that we require in our own country. I mean, foreign aid is an absolute joke in itself. That's my view on it, and I think a lot of the listeners would think the same.
I don't think anyone seriously thinks the money is going to go to a good cause or economic development in those nations. But this is something that we've never faced before, like the security deal with that communist China had with the Solomon Islands. It brought up analogies with the Cuban Missile Crisis. There could be a naval base 2,000 kilometers from our shores. And is it in the national interest to buy off the Pacific Islands to just keep them out of the Chinese pockets? Maybe.
Well, it's a very interesting discussion to be had, and I can see both sides of the story here and both points of view. But at the same time, I think really the best way that we can go about this is just building up our own defense. So then, if anything was to happen, we would be in a situation where we could basically defend and protect ourselves, and also make ourselves feared in a global situation as well. That the Chinese might look at us and say, you know what, I mean, they're not going to be just an easy prey that we can just go in and just, you know, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I know the Chinese are a lot more powerful than we are as a country. I mean, we're only a country of 25 million plus people, but at the same time, we can't be selling out national interests and just wasting money on these scams just for the sake of playing a game of basically like a political game here. It just you really have to sit down and really think about how we're going to approach this, I think.
I think that a lot in even the conservative media are giving Albanese and Wong a small tick this week is because they've been so weak and placating China for so long. Penny Wong, the most obvious. Sometimes it seemed like she was channeling Paul Keating, blaming us for the deteriorating relationship with China, and then there was. Thankfully, she's out of elected office now. Christina Keneally, during her campaign in Fowler, she was always bumping into CCP United Front groups, and then of course Richard Marles, who could be a defence minister this week. Speaking over in Beijing, talking about greater defence ties between the two, Australia and communist China, and mentioned, Labor's elder statesman Paul Keating and former Prime Minister and of course former New South Wales Premier Bob Carr, basically. Just what is it? And there's certainly a lot on the left, on the right, who just say give communist China everything they want and then some more.
Yeah, I don't think that approach is going to work though, because as soon as you start to show a little bit of weakness and you do start to buckle, I think they can really take advantage and then see us as basically all for the taking. So I think you really have to be careful in how you approach this situation. But I mean, the Labor Party, when in opposition, it's very easy for them to basically go on the attack and say, oh, we're too harsh on China and all the rest of it. We should be a little bit. But when they're actually in government, then it's a different story. And then when the heat is on them, then they understand that they have to then start to change a few of their views and start to mend. I mean, once the heat's on in government, it's a totally different ball game. And this is the thing. I mean, a lot of people, and I'm loving the comments as well, also that are coming through, because it's definitely a serious issue, and I think we really need to be careful in how we approach it.
And we also have as I said, the new ministry and annual cabinet being sworn in this week, but tomorrow morning the new opposition, the Liberals and the National parties will elect their leadership. And if we will, I'll just put up on the screen the current state of this is what Anthony Green's projections, because they're still counting absentee, pre-poll So this is the House of Representatives. So Labor is projected to have 75 out of 151. The Liberal and National Parties 57, and then of course the others. And there's there's still 3 seats in doubt. So Macnamara, which is in inner Melbourne, held by Labor's Josh Burns, that could still be won by the Greens, which would deny Labor a majority. I think Andrew Constance will win. Gilmore for the Liberals, win it off Labor, and Michael Sukkar will just hold on. But as you can see, Labor just scraping over the line to majority government. It wasn't a vote for Labor; it was a vote against the Liberals because. Well, I say the Liberals deliberately because the Nationals held all their seat, and the others 16 that includes 4 Greens and 7 Teals.
Yeah, it's very interesting results there. And I mean, when you're looking at the seats in doubt and what's left of it, I mean, Labor could even be denied a majority. And the thing that I don't understand is why on election night it was actually called so quickly. I've never witnessed an election that was just called within about an hour of the program starting at about 7 o'clock or so.
I
People were
wasn't
already
called
saying,
that early. I mean, we did a election night live stream here on the Unshackled and Wilms front channels, and it probably wasn't. Well, the general trend was about at 8:30, and of course by 11 it was Morrison conceded and Albanese claimed victory, even though it wasn't clear if Labor was going to get a majority or close to a majority. But that's what happened in 2019, where it wasn't known on the night whether coalition would scrape over the line. Obviously, ABC and now Sky News and Channel 9, they all have their, algorithms where they can tell the result by what votes are still outstanding.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, when I was watching it, I was actually at an election event, like an after-election event, and we were watching it on the TV screens. And from pretty early on, first it said the Liberals are not going to be able to form a majority. And then after that, it basically said Labor looks to be either getting a minority hung parliament government or a majority in their own right. But nevertheless, it was really I mean, on such a clear, when you're looking at the figures, they were pretty close. And I mean, even now they're not 100% sure. And I still think that they were, I mean, without a doubt, the Greens would also obviously put their hat in the ring for Labor, which would give them the numbers that they need. But I just think to myself, it was a little bit too on the night, unclear exactly how it was going to go. I think it was just a little bit too soon. But nevertheless, when you're looking at the results, I do agree with Gilmore and Deakin going towards the Liberal Party, and it's going to be McNamara is going to be really unsure there, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, on the one note, it would be a lot of people are saying, well, if Labor do get a majority, then they're going to be held to account, and they're not going to be able to then blame the crossbench for any issues that they have. But at the same time, if they do have crossbench there present with them, then people can then say, well, it's a Labor Green government, and they can use that as a form of attack too. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's the best way around this and how Labor can be held to account, whether it is on their own or whether it is with a Greens coalition.
Well, they're definitely not going to have a majority in the Senate, the Labor government. So this is again, Anthony Green's Senate projection. So this is with 71.8% counted, but obviously then preferences have to be distributed. So the Liberal and Nationals will have it has here at least 31, and Labor Party 26, the Greens 12, so that's 38 out of 76. Pauline Hanson is just look like she's going to scrape back in. We'll go to the the Queensland results in a moment. Jackie Lambie is going to get a, what do you call it? Call it a mini-me senator, and Tammy Tyrrell from Tasmania, and David Pocock. Sorry, I lost my.
No, that's all right. I was just about to say, no, definitely. I mean, it is good to see Pauline scrape over the line. We actually, at one stage, was looking at the UAP possibly getting something in Victoria, but we're not so certain now. So that's going to be a bit of
let's go to
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So Greg Mirabella from the Liberals is ahead, but it's going to depend on preferences. They're only ABC is only saying he's ahead because the Liberals have 0.29% of a quota left over, while United Australia Party only 0.27% of a quota, 4%. Legalized cannabis and Pauline Hanson equal on 2.9%. Liberal Democrats 2.3%. So it's going to be close, that one. Greg Mirabella is the husband of former Liberal MP Sophie Mirabella, who used to hold the seat of Indi before it turned independent. But you have a look at Pauline's vote, because Malcolm Roberts, when he was re-elected when he got back into the Senate, I should say, in 2019, he nearly pulled a full quota of 14.3%. Pauline Hanson is just at a half a quota here. In fact, Amanda Stoker, who's third on the LNP ticket, I mean, she will have 0.48 of a quota, but ABC is projecting that Pauline will get all of the other preferences before the LNP. Like, I was surprised that she polled so poorly in a home state. And of course, what is it? The surprise, the surprise package was the legalized cannabis party.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked at the result too, to be honest. I mean, when you're looking at the minor parties there, if you were to look at the One Nation combined with, say, UAP and also Liberal Democrats, that would basically make up similar to the quota that Malcolm Roberts got the last time around. So I think there was a couple of the minor parties splitting the vote in stages. But in saying that, they should have definitely performed a lot better than they did, and I was quite surprised. And on election night, like, I mean, I couldn't believe it when I seen the results coming in. There was definitely a 180 to thinking what it was going to be on the day. Like, I definitely didn't expect it at all.
You live and work in Wollongong. That's where you were campaigning and volunteering for the UAP. Now, both lower house seats in Wollongong, Whitlam and Cunningham, they're extremely safe Labor seats. But what did you see on the ground in the weeks leading up pre-poll and election day?
You're definitely right. They are safe seats, but I think that there is a little bit of a shift happening in that there's working class areas where they're starting to slowly turn away from Labor because Labor aren't really representing that kind of demographic anymore. Whereas, for instance, your more middle to upper class people, more city-centric people are more supportive of Labor. And I think that's where we're seeing a little bit of a shift in the vote. But even though it is a safe Labor seat, on the ground, we had a lot of people saying to us, lifelong Labor voter, but not this time after what's happened the last couple of years, definitely not going back to them. So we did see a little bit of a shift. Unfortunately, it wasn't as good of a shift that we were expecting for it to happen. In Cunningham, we ended up polling around 5%. One Nation roughly around the same, around 4 point something percent. The Liberal Democrats, I think, got about 2% as well. So that was basically when we added our figures up together in that seat. It was roughly the same as what the Greens get on a national scale. About 11-12% was basically what we were polling as the minor parties combined. And we really helped each other and worked together well as well. Like all the minor parties were really helping each other out, and we were really on the ground fighting this because even though a lot of people did say that they were changing their vote, there was still the rusted on people that just wouldn't change. And that's normally the older demographics. They're just, oh yeah, voted Labor for 50 years, can't change my vote, you know, and they're just, no matter what Labor does to them, I mean, or who's representing Labor, because the candidate up here was such a dud as well. But no matter what the case being is, they just couldn't basically shift away from Labor. You know, that's something that we noticed. There was just such a demographic that wouldn't change at all, unfortunately.
Well, looking at Cunningham, still, all of the Labor primary vote went to the Greens, minus 6.3% to Labor, plus 6.3%. So that was obviously happening on a national scale as well. Many people didn't believe that the Greens would poll as well as the polls were suggesting. But what is it? It was a green bath in Brisbane. Given that it was a teal bath in Melbourne and Sydney, and what is it? It was also a rainbow bath as well, with all three gay male Liberal MPs losing their seats in the inner city.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, with the vote there, I was shocked at the Greens vote because I actually thought that there was going to be a segment of that Green voter base, normally a hippie type of crowd, that was anti-vax and that would actually rebel against that party. And no doubt there would be some people, even some people I knew that were Green leaning in the past, that did come over to the Freedom parties, but it wasn't enough, unfortunately. I think it's very hard that people seem to be treating political parties like sporting teams. I mean, once you've got a sporting team and a code, it's just inbuilt in your system and they just won't change. No matter even if the political party changes in ideology, people, even if they disagree with the change, they'll still stick with the team. And I think that's something that people need to understand, that they should be embracing a set of principles rather than just being so loyal to a particular party, because if the party changes, it's no longer that party anymore. That's the way that I sort of see that.
And when your mob is in government, like all of the, I know that you're mainly more on Facebook, but the Labor Twitter drips, they're going to be severely disappointed with the federal Labor government. But obviously they'll still, because they're the most hardcore shills there is. They're still going to vote and campaign for Labor at every federal and state election.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is also to note that they've got the lowest primary vote since 1910, I believe. 32% is so low. Like, I mean, for them to actually scrape over the line with such a small margin is crazy. Like, I mean, normally they say that you have to be in the high 30s to be able to scrape in, and they were able to scrape in with 3% less than the Liberals on a primary national basis. But another thing to note also is that a lot of people don't mind the teal effect, because it has taken a few of the moderate Liberals that a lot of people really disliked out of the game now, which then might make a focus on the party to slowly shift, especially with Dutton as the sort of leader that's going to come in now. I think there might be a little bit of a shift and focus, because I've been actually told, a lot of the media are saying, well, the Liberals have to go to the left because of the teal effect. But I've actually spoken to higher ups in the Liberal Party, and they've actually said to me, look, we're actually not focused on that, and we're actually going to go towards the right, because I think even though there's a few city seats that the Tills have won off us, you can't continue to kind of basically play to that kind of it, because even if you're sort of playing to the left there and trying to cater to them, they're still going to vote for a left-wing candidate regardless, and you can't win them over. So it's better to focus on the outer suburbs where you can actually get some ground, because I mean, the Liberals are performing more and more better with working class Australians than the Labor are now, you know. And I mean, if you're looking at us at a local booths that we were actually campaigning in, our strongest areas where we got about 11%, UAP got 11% in areas that were really low socio-economic areas, strong Labor traditionally. And those areas there, we actually had a drop in the Labor vote by 20%. So the Labor vote held up in the more higher end suburbs, but when it came to working class, the Labor Party collapsed. I mean, there was people that were just sick and tired of them, and they just saw the direction of the party, rejected it. And like I said, 20% in primary drop for those areas is just madness. Like, that is a big deal.
I know that that's a popular strategy that many Liberal supporters are proposing, but they've actually got to be able to win these outer metro suburban seats. And I know that in Victoria, if you have a look here, there was only a 0.8% swing to the ALP, but the Liberals still lost 4 seats. Labor gained 2 in the inner city, Higgins and Chisholm, and of course the Teals picked up 2. There were swings to the Liberals in the southeast and in the northwest of Melbourne, but not enough to flip the seats. We've still got the state election coming up, but it seemed that there was just, especially in Kooyong, there was just so much resources by the Liberals poured into same Josh Frydenberg, and I never got even these Labor right people saying what a tragedy for the nation that Josh Frydenberg lost, and what is it, Alexander Downer said the voters got it wrong, which I was surprised that he said. Why was he so good? He was a really bland dry personality, and he always had these same talking points. The Australian economy is very resilient, or it's roaring back. He'd always come up with these zingers which he'd deliver so boringly.
Well, I think he really appealed to that kind of inner city elite, like a lot of the Liberals that were in these seats that the Tills won often. But this is why I mean that the argument that the media are making that the Liberals should shift to the left in order to win these seats back, those seats are basically gone. And I don't see the Liberals ever winning them back, because people in those seats are now voting along socially progressive lines. And if they're supporting Till candidates, I mean, you could have the most progressive Liberal in there, but it's going to be very hard to win them back because the demographic has just shifted so much. So even with people like Zimmerman, for instance, I mean, you can't get any more left-leaning Liberal than that. So why didn't he hold his seat? So that to me says that it would be very difficult for them to go down that path in order to try and win them back. And they should remain focused on areas that are traditionally more Labor and that are starting to turn, because the working class isn't really keeping with the Labor Party anymore. And I mean, you see Tony Abbott's victory in 2013, and I mean, that was an absolute landslide. And areas, say, in Western Sydney and more working class areas were coming towards the Liberals. And I think that's where they can appeal with a conservative like Dutton. I think he can basically get that sort of that family vote, that sort of and push that kind of social conservative message, be strong on national security. I mean, the Labor Party in their first term is going to be an absolute disaster, and it's going to be very difficult for them to claw back. I mean, we saw what happened under Ron Blood, and just survived the first term only barely.
Yeah, Abbott was a demolition man, and that's what Peter Dutton security and the beginning of the revolving prime ministership. So far, what is that? The boats haven't started, but I would assume with Sri Lanka broke and with food and fuel shortages, that there's certainly going to be many Sri Lankans who are going to try and flee to Australia as economic migrants. Just said here that my Odyssey is not working, but never mind. I thought it was saying that my mic had cut out again, but it's all good here on YouTube. But yeah, obviously with the new Labor rules, ANOL is safe for the next 3 years, but certainly the economy is going to go way downhill. Food prices are going to continue to go up. Even Biden is talking about food shortages and other supply issues. Energy is going up from July 1. Australia is going to get poorer.
100% there. And I mean, I just actually want to address a comment of someone saying that they're happy that Josh was out. And I agree with that, because if Josh didn't lose his seat, then he could be the leader of the Liberal Party right now. And it would be a totally different approach that he would take. I mean, I totally understand that. So even with the Teals winning, there is a little bit of a good thing in that it happened that way. But when it comes to what you're mentioning there, I actually believe that the Liberals could win a landslide in 3 years' time, based on if they focus on the cost of living and basically focus on people that are struggling and really appeal to the lower to middle income that are really doing it tough with fuel. Like you said, food is going to go up. I mean, Labor has inherited a difficult situation here. And in a way, I mean, when you think about it, it could be actually a good thing that the Liberals lost here, because now Labor has to deal with an absolute chaotic mess. And with the Liberals now being in a position of opposition, in 3 years' time, they could be looking at winning an absolute landslide, I believe. I mean, just focusing on those issues, national security will come up again, because, like you said, the boats will start coming in. They can be strong on that point, and it's going to be very difficult. I mean, just like Joe Biden being very unpopular as a president right now, I mean, in his first term, that will happen to Anthony Albanese. He's not a charismatic person. I mean, it's very difficult for Labor to win elections at all, and I mean, they rarely do. And that's why I was very surprised he did get over the line. But I think without the Teal effect and stuff, it just wouldn't have really been the same. But Anthony Albanese is basically a dead man walking here. I mean, he's going to be very difficult for him to win a second term, I believe. It's just going to be a matter of how much they lose by next time around.
Yes, I can certainly see that happening. And certainly Labor has indicated that they're going to go full in with the First Nations voice to Parliament from the Uluru Statement from the Heart, to have that enshrined in the Constitution in a referendum. We've seen, you mentioned Biden, what is it? His Attorney General setting the feds on parents who don't want their children taught critical race theory and other what is it? Sexual degenerate stuff in schools, and that's been a disaster for him. Albanese, he tried to sort of slap down those sort of like cultural Marxist issues by saying that that the definition of a woman is an adult human female and men can't get pregnant. But it's going to be the First Nation stuff where I think they're going to do the identity politics.
Yeah, I think they will too. And I mean, that idea of gender and stuff like that, that may shift as well, because if the Greens put enough pressure on the Labor Party, we've seen how Labor Party's national policies around that has changed. I mean, that party once believed, if you're looking back 10 years ago or so, marriage was between a man and a woman, and that slowly changed. So I do think the Labor Party, being a progressive party, will slowly change with push from the Greens. And the media, of course, establishment are going to really want them to go down that avenue. On the Indigenous stuff, 100%, I think they will definitely go down that narrow path. But I mean, a lot of Aboriginal groups are against that too, because I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything to better their situations that they've got on the ground. I mean, they're really struggling. They've got child abuse. They've got alcohol problems. And I mean, instead of addressing these things, this is just a massive virtue signal that does nothing at all to solve the problems that they're facing. So I think when it comes to these sort of issues, people end up getting sick of the Liberal Party after a little while when they're in government for, say, a decade. But then when they get a taste of Labor again, they start to realise that they don't like the taste. You know, so they think, let's have a change. But then when the change comes, they're like, oh, yeah, I remember now. I didn't really like this before. And that's why they don't stay in government very long.
At least at the federal level. At the state level, particularly here in Victoria, of the coming up to the state election here in November, the Labor Party will have governed for 29 of the past 40 years. There was just the 7 years under Kennett in the 90s, and then the 4 years of Bellew Napthine. And yeah, we've seen in Victoria when Labor gets entrenched and appoints all their mates to all and allies to all of these various bureaucratic bodies, then you have this systematic bias, and that's why Dan Andrews has been able to get away with all of these allegations of corruption, because there's not the checks, there's not many checks and balances. And why he was able to, partly why he was able to ride out the 6 lockdowns that we had here in Victoria over the past 2 years. We had the first brutal stage level 4 lockdown in 2020. So definitely, and we saw during the pandemic that the states they could certainly interfere with our lives like we never thought they could.
Yeah, it is absolute madness that people are voting these types of governments back in. I mean, and these people that are supporting such measures. I mean, I really thought that after these couple of years of all these lockdowns, restrictions, I mean, people, I think, because they've scaled them back recently, a lot of people maybe forgot actually what they went through last
Yeah,
year
it
and the
wasn't
year
mentioned in
before.
the
You know,
campaign.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they forgot that we couldn't travel, 5Ks out of our range of where we lived, and the curfews and stuff. I mean, these are really extreme measures. Yet a lot of people are still voting for these kind of parties, and it makes you think maybe they just haven't been punished enough. It just, when you actually go after the cost of living, and once they start to struggle to afford to eat, I think that's when people are then going to wake up and say, okay, hold on a second, something's happening here. And when you're really affecting the bottom line, that's when people are going to start to wake up. But unfortunately, it takes something extreme as that for them to change their mindset. What do you think is going to be, in regards to the Victorian election? How do you think it's going to ride out? Do you think the Andrews government is going to add, or do you think they're going to go down a little? Well, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's looking like Dan Andrews will be re-elected. The Teals, because of their success in Melbourne and Sydney, are going to contest those same areas at the state election. So that'll be a new dynamic. And most of the senior Victorian Liberal MPs, such as Deputy Leader David Southwick, he holds Caulfield, former leader Michael O'Brien holds Melbourne, and then there's obviously the Tim Smith is departing Kew, but that's considered like a blue ribbon seat. And so you can sort of see the same thing happening, that instead of trying to go for the outer suburbs, the existing MPs are just gonna pull the resources to save their inner city seats, which they're probably going to lose to Labor and the Teals. And what is it? Their response to their 4-seat loss in Melbourne, the Victorian Liberals, was to expel Bernie Finn this week, not for any disloyalty. He's been 100% loyal to the Liberal Party since he's been a member, but he got expelled because he basically just reaffirmed his 100% pro-life views. That was it.
Yeah, that was really sad when I saw that, because he came out and said, "Look, I've been a member for 41 years." And I mean, for someone to be that dedicated to the cause, and the Matthew guy is such a spineless leader, and there's no way that someone like that as a Liberal could ever win in Victoria, because people are thinking, well, you've got Labor and you've got Labor Light. I might as well just go with the real stuff, with the real Communist Party, rather than the one that's a fake. I mean, people have to understand that you have to be an alternative, like something with an alternative vision. You can't compete in Labor basically for the same kind of demographic that they're going to appeal to. You have to be focused on your people and be appealing to the base. That's what you need to do. And I mean, being pro-life shouldn't be an issue that is controversial within the Liberal Party, within the right side of politics. I mean, it should be quite standard. And what Liberals need to do is take their resources away from the CBD seats, which they are likely to lose, like you said anyway, and refocus on trying to gain the regions and the outer suburbs again, because that's where it can be won. I'm seeing massive drops in Labor support in those areas. At the same time, I'm seeing Labor rise in the cities. There's such a different shift happening that the Labor Party isn't the worker class party anymore, that they're starting to appeal because of the social progressive issues to the elites, and that the Liberals, with their, well, they're supposed to be socially conservative, they're appealing more to the working class people. And all they need to do is focus on basically issues of cost of living, really like just your standard kind of issues, bread on the table kind of issues. And that's what people are where they're going to win votes. I mean, that's where they need to focus on. And they really have an opportunity to do that. I believe that they have an opportunity. We've seen it under several leaders. And I mean, the media always go out and say, conservative leaders can't win. But all of the victories that the Liberal parties have had on a massive scale have all been from conservatives. I mean, Malcolm Turnbull nationally just barely scraped over the line that time in 2016. But Howard, landslides, Tony Abbott had a landslide. I mean, these are all people that were conservative. Yet this is where the media is saying that the Liberal Party can't win under conservative leadership. So all they have to do is seriously look at the history and the results and say, well, if we're wanting to win here, this is where we need to go. Don't worry about what the media pressure is and actually focus on where they can do well.
Sam Random Black says, Tim, can you get on Bernie Finn? I'll certainly, I've interviewed him before. I interviewed him at the 2019 March for the Babies, the last one that was permitted in Melbourne. So I'll certainly have a chat to him before the November election. But I know that, what is it? The New South, despite their absolute mess with pre-selections before the federal election, the New South Wales Liberals, they think they're an election winning machine because all of their premiers have been moderates. Barry O'Farrell, Mike Baird, and Gladys Berejiklian. She's got a net positive rating of 40, despite her having to resign because of that ICAC investigation, and for, well, giving Dan Andrews a run for his money with the brutal lockdown of 2021. And your Wollongong was considered part of Greater Sydney for that lockdown, and so you went through the whole lot. And what was their famous last line? That we've got the resources in place that will never have to lock down again. And Perrottet, he's shown himself just as cowardly on COVID. He implemented measures which he admitted don't work. And even though he's a Catholic social conservative, he more leans towards being a libertarian globalist.
Yeah, I do get that from him. I mean, he's someone that I think can play the part of appealing to different groups of people. So he can appeal to social conservatives. He can also appeal to that demographic of what you would term like the moderate globalist type of elites too. So he's someone that I think if he plays his card right, he can definitely win the following election next year, and he can definitely be someone that can lead for quite some time. But I mean, New South Wales is more of a conservative state than Victoria and does tend to be more Liberal supporting than Labor. But in saying that, when you're looking at the approach that you take to the state election and what you can actually do here, I still do encourage minor parties to take part in the election process. But I actually was thinking of a bit of a plan, or what I think would be a good idea, that since we have seen the rise of the teals in the cities, I actually think something that would work out really well is if we ended up getting a similar effect, but having a range of what you would call a Labor orientated independents running in the outer suburbs and working class areas, like a bit of a red wave.
Christina Keneally, like,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Tylee showed that it was possible to defeat a parachuted Labor hack, and her style of campaign can be replicated.
Yes, definitely. I mean, she worked hard on the election, and that's what you need. It's not only about having funding, which a lot of people say, well, you need the funding for that, but it's more than that. It's about actually getting locally and involved in the community and really connecting to the voter. And it shows that in a Labor safe seat that people can switch. They'll never switch to Liberal in a lot of matters because a lot of people are uncomfortable with making such a change, but they'll be comfortable switching to an independent. So an independent can basically appeal to a lot of different segment of the voting population. And Di Lee, as when she came out, she actually said, well, I'm not like the Teal candidates at all. My demographic and my community isn't, upper class elites. And, she basically stated that we're a different breed of type of independent. And in saying that, like I said, you can have someone like her running in a range of Labor seats, and those seats can easily switch. I mean, we've actually locally in my area, our Wollongong mayor is an independent. The Shellharbour mayor was a Liberal candidate in the past, and he switched to independent and he won off Labor. And this is a safe Labor area. So people, when they've got an option of an independent that works hard and is community focused, they're actually comfortable in supporting that person. And we're seeing a lot of independents gain in Labor areas. So I think just like the Tills were able to do in the Liberal areas, I think that we can do the same thing in Labor areas as well when it comes to a red wave of independence, so to speak.
And Di Lee, she also stood up for her community, local government area of Fairfield, which suffered the brunt of Gladys's brutal lockdown. And as we discussed, it wasn't mentioned during the campaign COVID, because basically the major parties didn't want to bring up bad memories. Though, what is it? We're a couple of days now from the Australian winter. I do know that COVID cases have ticked down now across the nation, I think, because the election campaign was a super spreader event. But I think a lot of Australians are quite rightly paranoid about especially with a Labor Albanese government, and federal Labor loved the quarantine camps and couldn't get enough of they wanted more mRNA vaccines. What it is that Anil has said that he wants a step up strategy for COVID. It's not over.
Definitely not. And I mean, we're actually lucky in New South Wales being a Liberal state that we didn't get any of these quarantine camps built over here. But when it comes to this pandemic, so to speak, I mean, you've got the introduction of this monkeypox now, just to sort of start scaring people again. But I think
there's a vaccine for it, the smallpox vaccine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it didn't take them long to come up with that one, that's for sure. And I mean, when they're talking about, the Labor Party come out and start to engage with their sort of base and say, oh, Australian manufacturing needs to, we have to get away from this, we have to get Australian. And what do they think of? Oh, yeah, mRNA vaccines, as Australian manufacturing. They can't think of anything else.
Oh, well, that's just an empty promise, because, Dan Andrews, he wanted one of the reasons he signed the Belt and Road, and so he could easily get cheap Chinese things like masks and from China, and trains from China. He was very salty when it was torn up by the federal government. So, don't trust Labor when they say build locally.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing as well. That's why the Labor Party is starting to lose a lot of its core base, is because, when they're signing up to agreements like that, that isn't what the Labor Party ever once stood for. They were a very national-focused, protectionist type of party, and they've just totally swapped and really embraced these globalist kind of ideals. And under Albanese, it's going to be a lot more of a focus. To his credit, I must say, at least ScoMo in his dying days as Prime Minister, he actually came out and said, you know what, when I get re-elected, I'm not going to sort of do lockdowns anymore. I'm not really into it anymore. We're back to normal now. And Labor never gave that same promise. See, so I think Labor Party, if given the opportunity,
you could never trust Morrison. He said he was open to signing their WHO pandemic treaty. Then he said it was rubbish. And
Mm.
throughout the 2 years of the lockdowns, like what is it? He basically did this signal that, I think that these states are going too far, but he enabled the states to set up with the Medicare Express app, the vaccine passport system, the allowing the vaccine immunization register to be, what is it, downloaded to people's phones. And he was the prime minister who well, until very recently, kept trapped unvaccinated Australians in their own country.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely is a coward of a leader. I mean, there's no definitely denying that. At the same time, I'm getting people saying to me that it was all part of some sort of mass plan or something, that, Morrison bungled the vaccine rollout on purpose, and because he had like a bit of, secretly he kind of sort of had sympathies and all that. I mean, you know, it's hard to believe that sort of stuff, because at the end of the day, I kind of understand that mentality of people thinking that. But as a leader, I mean, you should say, well, I'm not having blood on my hands with this, and just say, look, I'm not doing this. I'm not going down. Like, I understand the approach that people are thinking, well, maybe he tried to derail things and tried to sort of stuff up here and there, and that under Labor would have been worse. But we shouldn't be looking at the Liberal Party and thinking, well, they're not as bad as Labor. We should actually look at the party and say, well, they're a good party. And we can't get that from them because they've shown to be basically cowards, I mean, and a lot of people just continue on, oh, yeah, but they're not as bad. But we shouldn't look at our leaders like this. It shouldn't be about
Yeah.
the least worst candidate that is running the country. It should be a good candidate running the country.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. The coalition are less bad on the COVID restrictions, and this is also why it's concerning like obviously the new health minister will be sworn in next week, and you'll have the COVID zero lobby wanting push masks and more vaccines, although certainly I think that even though the Australian people bought the fear porn for the first 18 months when Australia was open, and then the Omicron wave swept the nation, and a lot of people got it and realized, oh, it's not that bad. And now everyone knows, like, all families that are getting it, and it's they're obviously feeling crappy for a week or two, but they get over it. There was certainly a switch that, because there wasn't lockdowns during the Omicron wave in January, it was a significant significant progress, given that, because Australia still has the reputation for the lockdowns, the quarantine camps, police choking people for not wearing masks outside. But yeah, the Australian people still, they bought the stay home, stay lives, mask up, what is it, and get vax, get boosted. And this is why the majority still voted for the major parties, including Greens.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I wasn't picturing that kind of result. And on the night, I just couldn't believe it. But on the ground, there was still signs of a lot of people that were brainwashed into accepting this kind of narrative. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was at a pre-poll booth, and I just sort of visited because I was managing the campaign locally down there. And I actually had a situation where a voter came out of the booth and was handing paperwork with all the different parties out to basically redistribute to us so we could recycle and reuse them. And one of the Labor volunteers, it was an old lady about maybe 70 years of age, and she got the paperwork. She gave the Greens one to the Greens, and then she looked at the UAP one and she scrunched it up and put it in her pocket. And I actually approached her and I said, can you give us the UAP paperwork back? And she just chucked it at me. You know what I mean? And I said to her, look, that's a bit rude, isn't it? And her response was, oh, you're anti-vaxxers. And I'm like, we're not anti-vax. We're just pro-choice. And we just want people the ability to choose, And she says, oh, and scoffed. And then the Greens volunteer comes over and sort of gets involved and says, "Oh, you're killing everybody," or "Oh, you got to trust the science." Yeah, you got to trust the science. You're killing everyone, and I'm like, and I said, trust the science. Yeah, who's paying the people that are telling you that? Like it's just one of those things that a lot of people have bought it, and I think deep down, a lot of people know something's not right, but they just don't want to admit it because once you are starting to get awake to these kind of realities, it makes life more uncomfortable for you. When you start to think that the government isn't there for your best interests, I mean, life starts to become a little bit more stressful and anxious then, and a lot of people don't want to live in such a reality. They want to, just like in the Matrix, just be in a fake world where everything is nice and dandy. And that's just the thing that I think a lot of people in time will start to understand that they've, bought a lie, but a lot of people just won't want to admit it. And that's the thing that we're noticing right now. It's becoming more obvious in time comes by that something's definitely not right here.
And also during the past 2 years, well, the inflation and cost of living is starting to bite now, but it's because people they were able to get all the food that they needed during lockdowns, like McDonald's and KFC were still open, and the government paid people to stay at home. Like everyone had access to the fast internet, and so could watch Netflix there to pass the time. And there was obviously lots of people who could work remotely in their pajamas via Zoom, and so there was a lot of them that actually loved lockdown and probably miss it as well. But the reason why I eager to mention Sri Lanka, like their government has been forced to resign, because that is really the only thing that leads to radical change in a country. Things have to get really, really bad where you can't fill up your car, the lights go out, and you can't find your food.
Yeah, I mean, when the issue of food comes into play, that's when we're really going to start seeing a change. I mean, there's no doubt about that. People can take so much, but when they're going to starve or when they're, struggling to afford to put food on the table, that's the critical issue that's going to make them switch. And I mean, it's hard to know that people have to wait for something like that to happen. I mean, people should see the signs beforehand, and it's just a shame that it has to go to that for it to happen. But unfortunately, society is like that. I mean, they really have to be pushed to the limits for them to then say, okay, we need to start thinking properly now, and making the right decisions and accepting the right sort of instead of the false narratives. But the problem is also that the representatives that we have in our areas are just delusioned, and they're just so far from reality. I mean, the one that won our seat for Labor, that was a new candidate and wasn't an incumbent. She actually is an 18-year staffer. So basically just, got handed the role easily, didn't even go through selection, which is quite common with Labor, especially to have candidates like that, just snuck in the role without any pre-selection process or anything. And then also at the same time, she's actually married to the Wollongong state member, Paul Scully, for instance. And a lot of people didn't know that because on her ballot paper, she used her maiden name. So she's kind of disguised the connection there. So now we've got, for instance, in my area, the state member and the federal member, a husband and wife team, which is unheard of. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, how bad that sounds, and definitely stinks, you know what I mean? But one family with so much power.
Yeah, there's a lot of power couples in politics and political dynasties. What is it? Anil's first wife, Carmel Tebbit. She was the state member for Marrickville, deputy premier under Christina Keneally. What is it? We have the power couple down here, Labor MLC Harriet Singh, married to Dan Andrews, chief of staff, Lizzie Ratcliffe. And in New South Wales, Maurice Payne is married to the state deputy Liberal leader Stuart Ayres. Oh, sorry, they're not married; they're partners de factos.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the problem. I mean, we're not looking at the work ethic and the character of the person. It's all about who you know rather than what you know. And we're getting that a lot. And I mean, a lot of people don't like that kind of stench that we've got in the two-party system at the moment, because we're not really getting local, rural people for candidates. I mean, they just go from university to staff a job to basically being the candidate, just in that kind of transition. And we deserve better than that as people, but people keep voting this way without really realizing what's going on a local level. I mean, for instance, we really connected with the local crowd of people. Unfortunately, it just wasn't our sort of time where enough people came over to our side. And I mean, we also had the Palmer factor, which really played into it too, and that made things difficult, because a lot of people, they did like our policies, but it was just the damaging of Palmer in the media and stuff, and that was enough for them to say, yeah.
Because he has a pre-existing political political incarnation. I mean, he was the member for Fairfax 2013-16. I certainly wasn't a fan of his party in 2013 or 2019, but I certainly liked United Australia Party 3.0. And yeah, Craig Kelly was the leader. Clive Palmer was the chairman. It actually had a core philosophy: freedom forever, no more lockdowns, no more mandates.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, they had potential to do something great, and I mean, Craig Kelly was a really good leader. Like, I really admire him, but unfortunately, and someone just mentioned about the Palmer ads. I think one thing about that is that they could have done better in marketing themselves. I mean, you see the Labor and Liberal parties were very negative in their campaigning, and I think that the UAP might have been able to have negative ads on the majors, and they might have cut through a little bit, but they did try and think, well, people don't like the negative ads. We'll go positive. We'll just say, a policy or whatever. Yeah. I mean, we'll do a 15-second clip or whatever highlighting a policy of ours. We'll be very populist in our messaging, appeal to pensioners, appeal to people, with HECS debts, appeal to people. I mean, our housing policy was a really strong policy that would have helped a lot of people. I mean, with the freezing of the
terrible economic policy, though.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely not something that libertarians would like. But I mean, with people that generally say are Labor voters, or people that are more sort of populist leaning, I mean, that's something that would appeal. But yet it didn't really cut through to the electorate, because they just had a negative view mainly on Palmer. I think that's the number one thing that destroyed or derailed the UAP's campaign. And I think if Palmer did take more of a back step and didn't have his face on the brand and just funded it behind closed doors, he would have done a lot better. The party would have done a lot better. But unfortunately, with these leaders, ego gets in place. And someone asked me about Q&A. I was on that. That was actually quite a while back. That I did ask a question on the Liberal Party with conservative and progressive sort of trend.
James Patterson.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. That was quite a while back. So that's probably where he noticed me from. But I think the party, they do have potential, but they really need to start to, like, Clive, if he's serious, has to start to play more of a backroom role and not put his face out there, because he's a marketing expert. He should know that he's not a popular guy, in the general sphere of things. So he should just say to himself, look, if I want the best for the party and I want to actually get results, I need to play more of a, like Simon Holmes at Court. Like, I mean, he didn't put his face out there. He funded it. Yeah, he was a funder. He didn't really sort of he wasn't really like right out there as a face, and he did a good job.
Yeah, he didn't have his face on billboards.
That's right, exactly, and he was able to capitalize and do. And I mean, that actually helped. I mean, if he actually came out and people were really sort of, and I know some people are aware of this already, but if more people understood that, like, a multi-millionaire's funding the campaign, and it's a real sort of snobby, rich kind of sort of thing that's happening here, a lot of people might have been a little bit more hesitant. But he was very able to be in the back room and not really put his face out there. So, and yeah, someone's mentioning about forming of parties, and I don't think that will ever happen, because there's just too much ego. On the right, everyone wants to be the leader. That's the problem. And there is a little bit of difference in some policy approaches. I mean, Lib Dems being more libertarian, and then One Nation and UAP being a little bit more sort of populist economically, a little bit more leaning to the left. So there is a bit of policy difference, but personality is the key thing here. And that's why we've got so many political parties on the right, because everyone just wants to be the leader of it and have their own vision. And there might be only a 5% difference between a lot of parties, but that's enough for people to say, yeah, no, I want to put my stamp on it and I want to be the one leading it. And I mean, if we were one party, there's no doubt about that we would be neck and neck with the Greens. I mean, there's no doubt about it, because when you're adding our votes up and our tallies on a national scale, we're basically equaling the Greens. So I think, and that would help also because there's one party of focus, and Greens don't really have much competition on the left. I mean, they've got little minor socialist parties, but they're not really gaining much traction. So I think the right does have to maybe in the future think of doing something like that if they're willing to try and sort of succeed on a mass scale. I think that's something that they have to look at. Who becomes the leader? That's the problem. You know, no one's going to want to relinquish their position of leadership.
We've got a super chat over on Entropy from 10.6 for $3 Australian. Thank you, 10.6. Will people regret not voting for 3% interest rates when they cross 10%? Well, I'm sure everybody who's got a mortgage, I'm not sure if you have a mortgage, Damien, we'd all love to pay the lowest interest rate possible, but that's not realistic because with low interest rates, the only way to keep them artificially low is for reserve banks to just print more money, and they've printed heaps over the past 2 years, and that's why inflation is happening.
Yeah, and I mean, I've actually heard from some people saying that, for instance, house prices, I mean, we're expecting it to drop down as interest rates go up. Some people reckon that might not even happen because of the inflation
Well,
issues.
we've got a Reserve Bank meeting this Tuesday.
Mm.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
is it this Tuesday? Sorry, it'll be next Tuesday, because what is that? This Tuesday will be the 31st, still May, so it'll be the 7th. So not this Tuesday, next Tuesday.
I mean, historically, they are still very low. So, I mean, it might take us some time. There might even be next year that they do start to take a hit when people really become mortgage stressed. At this stage, locally, I've seen that there hasn't been any change in the market at all, and it's still very expensive to buy over here. So, I think maybe next year it would be a little bit of a different story and things will shift unless people are, for instance, just continuing to buy, and there are maybe people like that are well off just buying multiple houses because they've just got the money to afford it.
Sure,
And
if you have the what is it? If the big business gets what they want and skilled migration returns, then that's obviously going to artificially prop up the property market like it did before the international borders were shut.
Oh yeah, I mean it will come to a stage where it's not feasible. I mean the both, especially in Sydney and Melbourne, it's just absolutely chaotic. I mean it's still quite affordable to move out in regional and rural areas, but the thing is we've got a problem here that the young people don't really want to do that. They want to stay where they've grown up. You know, when they were children, they want to be with family.
Post the lockdowns, suburban prices are increasing, but in the CBD, because who wants to get locked down in a high rise apartment tower with just basically a square room that you're trapped in 23 hours a day? So it's like really cheap to get a apartment unit in the CBD, but the suburbs, especially the ones that have turned teal, it's going up.
Yes, I mean suburbs that are not far from the city are definitely really expensive, and I mean even in my area, because we're not that far from Sydney, really. I mean it's an expensive area now. Even the low socioeconomic area here, the cheapest house you'll find is probably about 700,000. See, so it's not very cheap at all.
Really high.
Oh yeah, of course it is, you know. And I mean, I've even seen a bit of a shift in the country prices too. I mean, if you go out in country towns also, they've gone up quite a fair bit too. Not as bad as the city.
Escaping the even the suburbs, because they don't want to get trapped if there's any future lockdowns in the because this has been the terrible legacy of this pandemic, that lockdowns have been the go-to, and that's why everyone holds their breath when there's, what is it, monkeypox or Japanese encephalitis or what is that? There's always, what is it, somebody like in China getting infected with a new, what is it, strain of bird flu from a chicken or something.
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, it's crazy how people go down these sort of narratives and just accept them so easily. But we are seeing a shift. We are seeing a lot of people wanting a I just some random bloke BuzzFeed called me alt-right. I mean, anything to the right of
Yeah, well,
whatever it is.
that Mark DiStefano, who wrote that BuzzFeed hit piece on you, I mean,
Yeah,
he self-destructed his career, journalistic career in the
yeah.
UK by trying to sneak into a Zoom call of a rival paper. So he got his comeuppance.
Yeah, I mean, it's madness. I mean, like the far right. I mean, it's so loosely used these days that everyone that's not basically a communist is far right anyway, according to these people. I mean, it's just so loosely used. It's just it becomes a joke in a way. I mean, I'm seeing people that are very moderate, that, for instance, are supportive of the freedom measures, and that they just are called far right, and they're just like thinking what. And I did see something about signage. I don't know if you could put that comment back up because I didn't read the whole thing, but it seemed interesting. Yard signs around almost. Yeah, well, I mean, what we noticed here, the Liberal Party locally didn't run a campaign at all. They didn't have volunteers at booths. They didn't have signage. They had nothing. They just run a dud, like basically a ghost candidate. And I mean, I guess because it's not something they would ever win, so they just didn't bother. But that's where we thought that we were going to be sort of replacing them in the sort of, we were going to be the main competition. And when it comes to signage, I'll say something about signage. We were putting up signs, me and one other person. Every night we were going out there till 2 o'clock in the morning, putting up signs, and there was people replacing them, people taking them down, defacing them.
These shenanigans are nothing new.
I'm sure you get it way too. Yeah. Like it's quite common. And I mean, the Labor and Greens, I mean, they're right behind that sort of stuff. I mean, they're not even ashamed of it either. And we actually, yeah. Well, I was just saying, we caught actually a few people. We got their number plates. We got some home addresses. We sent it to the police. They did seem keen on chasing it up and investigating it, so to speak. And I mean, nothing really come from it yet as such. But we did confront people that were doing it, and they just basically thought that they were allowed because they were, following the truth, and that we were just some crazy people. But we actually ended up 400 signs that got taken down of ours that we ended up having to replace. And I mean, we were still putting them up because we had an unlimited supply. We made sure that we were, financially, we really put a lot of money in the electorate. We even had a truck with advertising going around the electorate, for 2 weeks, in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. So there was a lot of money put in. We had big events and everything, but unfortunately, it just didn't translate to as many votes as we had hoped. But the dirty tactics and campaign is just disgusting. And I mean, even from Labor volunteers at booths, they were harassing our people, like putting them down and saying, oh, why are you following that? They would talk to voters as they come in, and they would say, oh, don't ignore those guys. Don't follow them. Come and vote for us. I mean, we even had a funny one, and I actually learnt this last night. This is something that'll make you laugh, right? So we had a guy that was... He was able to speak the Macedonian language, for instance, right? So he was we were in a pre-poll area that was a high contingent of that demographic. So he was talking to a lot of people, and what we actually had was a Labor Party voter actually came up to him, and he showed the Labor Party flyer or the how to vote card to my volunteer, and he actually said something really cringe. You're going to laugh at this, but he actually said, this party here is the only party that's going to put bread on my table. Like, no joke. Like, I couldn't believe, I was just laughing hysterically when I heard that, right? So then what he would do is he would tell some of the voters of that demographic, like, oh, this party here, UAP will put bread on your table, just as a bit of a laugh. And people were sort of buying it, But then what ended up happening, the Labor candidate overheard this, and she's like, oh, this isn't good. We got to get one of our guys in. So what they did is then they got one of their volunteers that could speak the same language. And after they get our flyer, then they go to the Labor guy, and the Labor guy in their dialect was saying, look, don't trust them. They're liars. Come and vote for us, so they would derail us. So they're really sneaky, the Labor Party here, I mean, they've got such a foothold on the electorate, and
Yeah,
they just
the Labour machines
oh yeah,
are the
terrible.
what is that? They're the best political machines in the
Oh,
in the world. I mean, even though
oh yeah.
they're terrible, they're very
Mm,
effective, and that's why they've been so
mm,
effective in Victoria. Mel McPhee
mm,
says, Tim Live is so late. We probably should wrap up now because, yeah, it is getting quite late here on the East Coast. I said at the
mm,
start of the show, it was the show started, well, later and on a unusual night because you have to put your children to sleep. I'm heading
mm.
to Sydney tomorrow, so there'll be no show tomorrow. But I'm planning when I'm going to pass Wollongong on the way back from Sydney. So we're going to meet up in person, which we haven't done for about, was it 5 years?
It was quite some time. I don't even remember when it was. I mean, we met at a convention before, and also earlier you came to Sydney, and we met up in Sydney before. But it was some time that
Yes.
we have met. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So it
but
would be good to meet up.
you're one of the originals from the
Mm.
beginning. Like, obviously, I was
Mm.
the founder, so I've been here since
Yeah,
the beginning.
yeah,
But
back in
our
2016.
yeah, yeah, but our mate Luke Ruffley has returned with both the Australian, it's a mouthful, Australian Free Independent Press Network, and there's also the
Mm.
Australian Independent News Network. So I'm going to be catching up with Luke as well.
Mm.
And yeah, we will see what the next 3 years brings us. It's not going to be good for freedom or for food and fuel as well.
Mm.
Definitely with Labor in charge of ASIO, the AFP, and Border Force, they're going to be watching
Mm.
people like us and other. I just published a story tonight about the what is it, surveillance and targeting of nationalist groups will intensify with a federal Labor government.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely dire times ahead. It's going to be very scary. But I mean, if the accelerationists are actually legit and they think their way is going to work, I mean, this is the time now that we're going to see if accelerationism actually works. I mean, because we have to maybe get a period of time where it's really, really bad for then people to have a retaliation or a rebel against it and to go totally opposite and do a 180. So, I mean, maybe that's what we need. I mean, it's unfortunate that we're going to go through these dire times, but sometimes, like the old saying that hard times create strong men and so forth, maybe that's what we need, and we just need those times to come again. Because unfortunately, we've had good times for so long now, and it created the sort of mess that we're in. I mean, just the mentality of people just getting too comfortable in life,
Mm.
just too relaxed and not really alert and thinking that bad things can happen to them. And that's why they're just so trusting of what's going on. It's just amazing that people don't have that kind of fight in them, or that kind of, aspect where they start to question things, because it's just everything has been so good for people for so many years now that it's just inconceivable that things can go wrong. I mean, so we can only hope that things do turn around soon, and the state elections might show a little bit of promise in that, but we just got to wait and see. I just don't know what the voters are going to do, but it'll be interesting to see what happens, that's for sure.
Some random bloke has still got lots of questions. You don't have your own channel, but you've got a Facebook page. You should also get a Telegram channel as well, I reckon.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really think of doing a separate channel per se. I mean, I was quite happy just doing things through the Unshackled, but who knows what the future holds. I mean, at the moment, I was getting really involved with, managing campaigns and stuff, but I definitely would like to be politically focused, but I just have to see where things take me, and just suss it out and see how life goes, really. So yeah.
But definitely the annual Unshackled Awards for
Mm.
2022 will be back, and that's you do the heavy lifting with that. That's been your baby since right at the beginning, and I'm thinking maybe we should have a new category this year, Sinister Globalist of the Year, because they just had their annual meeting in their Davos lair.
Yeah, I mean, we just heard. I don't know if you've actually noticed this, but I heard a small clip from the World Economic Forum, and they were saying something about depopulation and how good that's going to be, within a year's time or something. And people were clapping like it was such a great thing they said. And I was thinking, are you crazy? I mean, these people are really sinister. They're just maniacs, And I mean, a lot of people, you show this stuff to them, they openly admitted it. Exactly, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. But
Klaus
apparently
Schwab-
it's only a conspiracy theory if you think what they're saying is a bad thing.
That's right, and I mean, you showed the average person on the street, and they'll think, "Nah, that can't be right. That must be edited or something." But it's actually
Yeah.
legit out of their mouth, and they still don't believe them.
What is that? T. Ezra says that video, the one about
Oh,
depopulation,
okay.
said fake.
Oh,
I haven't seen that video myself, but
mm,
definitely the Alberta Flores. He did say back in 2018 about the what is that the peel that sends a notification when you ingest it. That's what is it? Even AP said that that wasn't from this year, it was old, but he still said it.
mm. I mean, they have from time to time kind of, been pretty open about that kind of thing. I mean, they're definitely not lying about it. I mean, even if there are some things that may have been edited, but there has been legit, I mean, even if you read the Global Reset book, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I've
it's
got,
very,
I've got, I've got the book here.
well, there you go. There we go. That'll be an interesting read for sure. But I mean, they're very open, and that's what I mean. I mean, for them to be so open about it, they must be that confident that people are just going to be supportive of their plans, and that whatever retaliation there is can't bring them down. That's just it's an arrogance. Such an arrogance that they have that they can even tell you to their faces, and they think that they're going to get away with it. And I mean, largely according to when you've seen the elections have passed here, I mean, it looks like that they're right. So I'm just hoping in time that changes.
Morrison addressed the World Economic Forum.
What was that? Sorry.
Scott Morrison, he addressed the
Mm.
World Economic Forum while he was Prime Minister. On the panel with Bill Gates was former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark. We had our chief censor, the e-safety commissioner over there. Her highlight was saying we need to recalibrate free speech online. So coming soon to a nation near you.
Yeah, it's scary times. And I mean, this is what I mean, that leaders really have to start thinking, well, look, I mean, they have to stop continuing to pander to these globalists and actually think, well, maybe if I sort of show that I'm supporting them, but I'm not really supporting them. And, like, you just got to be clear from the get go, and be Trumpian when it comes to this sort of stuff, and say, look, we just got to focus on our nation, our sovereignty, sort of get away from these kind of, globalist kind of pacts like the Paris Accord and all that. Stop wasting money of ours and, basically bankrupting our country, and start, trying to put the people first and trying to build this country again, because it's been a disaster, and what's been left of it, I mean, it's just, it's really derailed and damaged our country for a long term. I mean, they've said that to pay off the debt now, it might take 180 years or something like that. I mean, there's definitely got to be having to be some changes now. I mean, they can't continue to overspend and be like this. They've got to really be smart and try to manage the economy properly, and try and get this debt under control, because people are going to suffer in the long term.
All right, we'll bid you all good night, and from me, good week. Thank you so much, Damien, for coming on tonight, and I'll see you later this week. And I please make sure that you follow my Telegram and Gab, because I'll certainly be posting updates during the week, and I'll also be catching up with many of the freedom fighters who I haven't met, who are based in Sydney there. So take care, everyone. Stay safe, stay sane, and stay healthy.
Tim's News Explosion. 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 Tim's News Explosion.
We've actually got one last super chat from 10.6. Will the UAP keep its membership for further elections for $3 Australian? Thank you, 10.6. We didn't forget.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting, and I really like that you asked that question. At this stage, some intel I've been told is that the UAP apparently can't contest Victoria and New South Wales state elections because they didn't meet the deadline of registration. Now, that's something that I've been told. Whether it's 100% legit, but I'm pretty confident that that is something that from the top has been filtered down to candidates and so forth, that can't occur.
Well, New South Wales, Victoria.
New South Wales and Victoria, they didn't register in time because it has a 12-month field where you have to register the party. And
I'll double check for Victoria. I know that they have different different processes.
Okay, well, I definitely was told New South Wales. Victoria, I will get some more information on that and definitely let you know. When it comes to the party, I think the poor results is definitely, sent a bit of a shock through the party. Their future it's a bit hard to tell at the moment. I mean, now what I've been told is that they do want to continue on because they've built such a big membership of 85,000 members and so forth. At the same time, at what capacity it's going to be is remaining to be seen, whether they're going to save it for federally or whether they are going to, between now and then, contest a state election here and there. But I really think that they need to look at how their performance was and try and sort of reassess and see what things that they can do properly. And one thing is the Palmer effect, like we mentioned before, whether he can maybe take a more background a role rather than putting his face out there, and that's going to be very hard for him to accept that, of course. The second issue is that there was a lot of problems with headquarters, HQ, and there was a very centralized approach in some circumstances. So, for instance, candidates wanted to go out there and do a lot of things, but they were getting held back. And that was something that was very difficult because they wanted to be on the ground and doing things, and they were getting held back and saying, yep, no, don't do this, wait for this to happen, wait for that announcement. And that was really derailing as well. There was a few mistakes, of course, that happens in every election campaign. But I think it'll be very interesting, and we will definitely give you an update on that. I don't have all the answers as to what's going to happen. Only the leadership is going to know what's going to happen. I mean, if you contacted Clive himself, I mean, he's probably still thinking what direction he's going to go in and what he's going to do with the party. I mean, I would like to see him running, but I just at this stage don't know. All I can say is that I've been told certain things, and that is that there was an issue with registration in state elections, and that there was also a few problems within the party, and whether they're able to regroup or whether he's going to just end up unwinding at this stage, I really don't know. So we're just remaining to be seen here, and we can just wait, see what happens, and if they contest future elections, and I mean, they'll give us an update in time anyway. So that's the best sort of answer with that I can give.
And with that, it's definitely good night.